professional firefighters, Brandon Flanzer.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and good afternoon. My name is Brandon Flanzer. I'm a firefighter here in Iowa, and I'm a proud member of the IFF. I grew up in the fire service. My dad a firefighter, my grandfather a firefighter. Many nights and holidays were spent at the firehouse. It is something that was always constantly there in my life, and something I grew a passion for. Raised in the middle-class family in Wisconsin, I learned firsthand what hard work is, and saw the sacrifice it takes to grow a family in today's America. I was also witness to the danger that our noble profession presents. So it is with great pride and honor that I stand before you today, representing my brothers and sisters, fighting for the safety and security of those that keep the communities of Iowa and America safe. The International Association of Firefighters represents over 316,000 firefighters, paramedics, across the United States and Canada. The men and women of the IFF know what it takes to keep America safe and to protect the citizens of the community that they were sworn to protect day and night. We know firsthand the tools that we need to do our job properly and professionally. We understand that serving our neighbors takes commitment, teamwork, discipline, and most of all, courage. As we look ahead to the 2020 presidential race, one candidate exemplifies themselves in all those traits. One candidate who has had firefighters, paramedics, and all working Americans in his heart since day one of being sworn into the U.S. Senate in 1973. During his time in the Senate, he was a leader on every single piece of legislation that impacted firefighters. I am, of course, speaking about our former Vice President, Joe Biden. Joe Biden understands that the middle class built this country, and he's working to restore the basic bargain that when you work hard, you get to share in the prosperity that your hard work created. He's a man who solves problems. He cares deeply for our country, always working to make it better. Just like my fellow firefighters do in our own communities, day in and day out. Joe's record on public safety issues, those issues that directly impact the safety of the American people, is very clear. He has always been there. He has time and time again voted to keep our neighborhoods safe. By creating the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Responders Act, and also the Assistance to Firefighters Grant, Joe helped keep firefighters on fire trucks and made sure that fire departments across America had the tools, equipment, and training that we need to keep our neighborhoods safe. Both would not have been possible without the efforts and dedication of Mr. Biden. Joe has always had the best interests of all working Americans in his heart and mind. His lifetime has been dedicated to caring for people and supporting them when they need it, especially when it matters the most. Just like my brothers and sisters of the fire service do every day. And America knows that when we need him the most, Joe Biden is there. Just like he's here right now. He is a man of commitment, committed to the American people. He's here as a team player, working with all members of Congress to better America. He is here as a man of dedication to keeping America safe. He's here with courage, the courage to always do the right thing. So please join me in welcoming the former Vice President of the United States and the next President of the United States of America, our very good friend, Joe Biden.
We take care of our own. We take care of our own. Wherever this flag's flown.
Hey, folks.
We take care of our own. From Chicago to New Orleans, from the whistle to the bone.
Good to be back. How you doing?
Shotgun shack to
God love you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Folks, it's really good to be back.
Calvary State.
You know, Brandon, there's an old expression. God made man, and then he made firefighters. I owe, and this is not hyperbole, I owe the fire service in my state and the fire service across the nation so much on a personal basis. You know, we don't realize what they do until, in fact, you need them. They Fire service in my state, they saved the lives of both my sons when I lost my wife and daughter. They used the jaws of life and took them hours to get my kids out and get them to the hospital and save their lives. They saved my life. I suffered from a cranial aneurysm. It means a bleed in one of your arteries going into your brain and in your head. And most people don't make it. The old bad joke is, how do you know someone with an aneurysm is on the autopsy table? They got me in the middle of a snowstorm, all the way down to one of the best neurosurgeons in the country, happened to be at Walter Reed, when I couldn't get down there. They got me in time down there for a 13-hour operation. They saved my life. They saved my home. No, I want to tell you these guys do. They saved my home. I was doing Meet the Press and back a long while ago, and lightning struck my home. My wife was in the home. And the smoke ended up coming in through underneath the air conditioning system, and then all the vents, and the floors were collapsing. It was so thick you couldn't even see in the windows. And they came and they got my wife, and they also saved my home. And they risked their lives doing it. You know, the law enforcement, the emergency service people, firefighters, they're the only people who run into danger voluntarily. And they're an incredible breed of cat, man, I want to tell you. There's something else. So I want to say thank you. And folks, it's great to be back. Look around, see an awful lot of friends. You know, it's good to be back in this very building. The last time I stood here was at the end of the last election, and you elected your new representative, Abby Finkenauer, to the United States Congress. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really mean it, thank you. And we took over the Congress. The House of Representatives now in Democratic hands, and more Lord, she is doing one heck of a job, for real. Folks, the good news and the bad news, you're going to see a whole heck of a lot of me. I promise you this, no one's going to work harder in Iowa than Joe Biden to get your support and gain your confidence. And Rob came back, and Senator, thank you so much. And I want to also say hello to Art, who's your state representative, and I don't even know Todd, Senator Taylor, and Brent, Lynn County Supervisor. You know, I used to be a supervisor. We call them councilmen back where I was. It's such a hard job, I ran for the Senate. It was too difficult because they know where you live. And they go, and what does a supervisor do? You know, it's a tough, tough job, but thank you for doing it, man. And I want to thank Brett and Bill, Bill and Dustin, the business managers, IBW Local 405 and 204, respectively. And I want to make no mistake about it, I'm a union guy. It's not just labor, it's union. Union. You guys built the middle class. Folks, on a serious note, you know, you all know in your gut that this election for president is different. It's different than any election we've gone through, not because I'm running, it's different. And the reason it's different is the very core values of our nation, our standing in the world, our very democracy. Everything that's made America, America is at stake. And we know why. Limited to 4 years, this administration will go down in history as an aberrant moment in time. But give 8 years to this administration in the White House, we're going to forever and fundamentally change the character of the country. We can repair now, God willing, we win, or what we've gone through. And we're going to be able to get back together, God willing, our international partnerships. The fact of the matter is that we've not had a president who ever has embraced so many autocrats and dictators and stiff-armed our friends. It's worrisome. It's a concern. 8 years of this presidency, you'll find our alliances are fundamentally changed. And by the way, we need these alliances. We cannot be the policemen of the world alone. We need these alliances. But folks, we're not going to let this happen. You know, unlike anything in my lifetime, I see this election is different. in that you saw Charlottesville. I know at the time I wrote an article saying about Charlottesville when you saw these neo-Nazis carrying swastikas coming out of the fields with torches, with contorted looks on their face, accompanied by white supremacists chanting hate and deceit and going on and talking. You're using the same anti-Semitic bile that was used in the 30s in Germany. And then the president, when the rest of the world was looking for condemnation, and we were, when those good, decent people came and said, who were fighting against hate, not in supporting hate, and there was a clash, what did he say when asked? He said there were good people, some good people on both sides. I tell you what, I don't think we've ever heard, very fine was his phrase, very fine people on both sides. You know, and just a few days ago when the president was critical of my saying that, and I said it back and wrote an article in Atlantic Magazine at the time it occurred, he now has come down and doubled down on concocting a phony story about how these violent thugs only wanted to protect the statue of Robert E. Lee. Give me a break. No, I mean, this is, enough's enough, man. This is nonsense. The very rally was advertised as a white supremacist rally. Anti-Semitic chants were clear. Hatred was on the march, and he knew it. As I said at the time, we're in the battle for the soul of the nation. And we are. We are in a battle for the soul of the nation. That's why, above all else, we have to defeat President Trump in 2020. Because the stakes are so high for what I call the backbone of America. We've got to reconstruct the backbone of America. The backbone of America are hardworking, middle-class Iowans and Americans. The country wasn't built, I'll make it clear to you, and make no mistake about it when you're confronted with it. The country was not built by Wall Street bankers and CEOs and hedge fund managers. It was built by ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. Not a joke. That's a historical fact. You built America. The neighborhoods you and I come from built America because it was built by, as I said, the great American middle class. Because, folks, the history of the journey of this country has been, we have done remarkable things when the middle class has been given just an even chance. Just an even chance. But today, an awful lot of folks are worried that the American dream is literally slipping from their grasp and will beyond the promise for their children. You have over 35% of the American people saying they do not believe that their children will be able to have the same opportunities they had, be able to have the same standard of living they had. That's the first time in a long history that that's been said. But today, the reason, you got to ask yourself, how did this happen? How did we get here? And I think the main reason we got here is because there used to be a basic bargain in America. But today, that bargain that drove the most successful economic engine in the history of the world, that bargain is pretty simple. If you contribute to the welfare of the outfit you work with, you got to share in the benefits. If an enterprise hit hard times, everyone took a hit, from the CEO to the secretary. But folks, the only people today who benefit, the only people who benefit now today, because that bargain is broken, are the CEOs. And when the company does well, the CEOs and the shareholders are the only beneficiaries, not their employees. The only people who get hurt when a company goes through tough times are their employees. Things have changed. I have a cartoon hanging in my office that came out of the New Yorker, and I had it hanging in my office when I was vice president. I've kept it in my office as a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. And it sits there, and it's a picture of a big rotund guy sitting at a table, looks like he's being interrogated. And on the table there is a burlap bag with a $sign on it. And he's looking at his interrogator, and he's saying, "I'm sorry, how was I supposed to know he was a job creator?" Come on, man. Job creator? There used to be. Today, my Republican friends in corporate America has adopted the notion that the only responsibility corporations have are to their shareholders. That's so much malarkey. It's just not true. The fact of the matter is, they have obligations than they've had in the past, obligations to their workers, to the employees, to the community they live in, to the environment. But folks, look, my dad, who didn't own but ran an automobile agency, you're telling me he didn't create thousands of jobs by those cars being sold? The folks on the line didn't change them? You're telling me that the people who grow our food, process our food, package our food, sell our food, deliver our food, they're not job creators? Look, folks, this is getting just backwards. I think it's incredibly important that we restore the dignity of work. My dad used to have an expression, for real. He'd say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. But think of all the people today who don't think they can say that to their kids. But today, in Iowa and around the country, things have changed. I think the moral obligation of our time is to rebuild the middle class. That's my North Star. And the reason for that is when the middle class does well, everybody does well. The wealthy do fine. The middle class does fine. And people have a way up. There's hope. There's optimism. Folks, when we rebuild the middle class this time, I'm going to make sure everybody comes along. Everybody. Regardless of their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their religion, where they live, whether they have a disability. Everybody gets in this time. Everybody. And for me, that will be what I consider the measure of economic success as a nation, not just the growth of the GDP. At its core, it gets down to a fundamental issue, the dignity of work. Being able to provide. And what do I mean by that? The dignity of work is being able to provide for your security for your family and yourself, being able to do something that you can leave behind, being able to be in a position that you're able to do something that in fact generates some hope for your kids and your families. That's what dignity is about. Look, how can you maintain a person's dignity if they can't, how can they maintain their dignity if they're not able to take care of their sick child because they can't afford to cover a pre-existing condition? How can that happen? How can that happen? How can we, a man or a woman, a husband, a wife, anyone who watches a family member maintain their dignity if an insurance company can come along and say you've now, in your palliative care, you've now reached the end of your insurance, no longer? How can a parent do that? How can that be the case? Excuse me for, as we used to say in the Senate, a point of personal privilege. A lot of you knew my son, Bo. My son, Bo, was diagnosed with a terminal disease. We knew, the chances were close to zero. I couldn't imagine if he didn't have insurance, if he hadn't been a military man and had the coverage he had. I can't imagine what it would have been like if they said about 6 months into his year of fighting for his life, said, no, you've outrun your insurance. We can't do it anymore. Talk about dignity being stripped from you. Or education. I can't imagine a parent has to maintain their dignity. It's not just about if you can't afford, like you can't today, to get your kid to school after high school. But think what it does to the parent. When you look at there's nothing worse, as you all know, over parents. There's nothing worse than being able to look at your child and know they have an opportunity or a problem and not being able to respond to it. My Lord. I remember when I was in high school, I had an opportunity to go to an expensive school, and my dad wouldn't let me take the grant and aid, and he didn't want me waiting on tables. He said, my son's not going to do that. So I remember going down my senior year to change cars with my dad to be able to drive a nice car to the senior prom after a game. And I remember running in, parking my old car, and running in asking Mary, where's Dad? She said, he's out in the lane out there. And I walked out, my dad was pacing back and forth. Absolutely true story. My dad was pacing back and forth, and I looked at him, he said, oh, Joey, I'm so sorry, honey. I'm so sorry. And I thought before cell phones, maybe something happened to my siblings or my mom or something terrible. I said, what's the matter, Dad? He said, I went to the bank today, honey, to get a loan to help you to get to school. But he said, they wouldn't give me the loan, honey. I'm so ashamed. I'm so ashamed. He had no reason to be ashamed. I got to school and got a good education. But folks, think of all the people you know, maybe some of you. Think of all the people you know who've been in that situation. It's about dignity. The dignity of work, being able to be in a position where we have affordable education, affordable health care. Look, you know, the fact of the matter is that the philosopher, it's a strange thing to be quoting Kant at a political event, but Kant had an expression. He defined the dignity this way. He said, people should never be treated as a means to an end, but an end in themselves. Folks, today's corporate culture and this administration, they don't care about your dignity. They're squeezing the life out of workers. They're making a decision that make it harder and harder for us to meet our people to meet their basic needs, stripping them of their personal dignity. You know, but there's been a war not only by waging a war against collective bargaining, which has helped build the middle class and secure the rights of people who aren't members of labor. We have a 40-hour week, we have overtime, all these things because of labor, even if you're not a member of labor. But here's the point. What sort of crept into the system without us really paying much attention to it for the last 20 years, non-compete agreements. You know, the ability to bargain for yourself, not as a part of an organization, a non-compete agreement. You're making sandwiches used to be making sandwiches for Jimmy John's, you have to sign a non-compete agreement, they changed it, and so you couldn't walk across town and maybe get $1 an hour more working for another McDonald's or Harvey's or whatever it was. What's that all about? It's all about one thing, suppressing wages. Suppressing wages. Not a joke. And the other thing is, you know, look what's happened. Companies aren't allowed to deny overtime to people who are hourly workers. So what do? They reclassify people as managers. If you're working in a supermarket and you're stacking the shelves, but you control somebody who has the cart to drive out to bring all the cans of tomato soup you're stacking, a lot of places say you're now a manager. Why are you doing that? That deprived a significant number of hourly workers, and I'm going to get the number for you, over 4 million hourly workers, $1.2 billion in lost wages just last year. What's that about? Where did that go, that $1.2 billion? No, really. It went back to buying back their stock. Buying back the stock of a corporation in order to raise, because 90% of all CEOs, they get their compensation that way. 90% of their compensation, I should guess, goes that way. What are we doing? What's happened to us? Folks, speaking of overtime, I think it's long past time that there's a minimum wage of $15 an hour in the United States. I really mean it. No, I really mean it. I mean, look, folks, it's, let's talk about, which you have a right to know, what I'll do as president, my plan. My goal is to reward work, not just wealth. The first step is we have to deal with that god-awful tax cut the president should put through. By the way, you all did really well on that, right? You all really saw things grow. Look, folks, we have to eliminate some of the $1.6 trillion in loopholes that are in the law right now. You can't possibly justify them. You can't justify them all. As I said, when a very conservative Republican was president named Reagan, there were $800 billion in loopholes. Now it's $1.6 trillion. What's happening to us? Look, the super wealthy have gotten significant help as a consequence of those loopholes. and greater incentives for companies to ship jobs overseas in those loopholes. Folks, look, as a consequence of his tax cut, and I said it when it was being passed, when they were moving it, he's going to use it as an excuse by creating a deficit. These guys are deficit hawks, right? They increased the deficit by $1.9 trillion of next year. Now what are they using it for? They're now coming along and saying, we got to deal with that deficit in the Republican Congress, the Senate, and the Republicans in the House. You know what we have to do? We have to deal with taking on that social safety net that's costing us too much. Not a joke. Here's what they're saying. If Trump wins in 2020, I guarantee you that Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security will be on the chopping block. There's been no question about that in terms of what the majority leader of the United States Senate has said. And we can't let that happen. You earned those rights. You earned them. And folks, we need to get rid of this capital gains loophole for the super wealthy. Look, why do we reward investment over work? Why do you pay, for example, Warren Buffett got it right. He pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. How can that possibly be in this country? How can we be the place where, since that tax cut has gone into effect, twice as many American corporations that are multi-billion-dollar corporations pay zero in taxes? How can that be? How can that be justified? It's wrong. It's not only economically wrong, it's morally wrong what they're doing. Look, the second thing that I will do, my plan that I will do, is make sure we finish the job on health care. Folks, I don't have time to give you lay out all the details, all the plan. This is going to come out as I campaign across here for you, but let me just, because it will keep you here forever. But folks, we've got to finish the job. When we passed the affordable health care, I told President Obama it was a big deal, or words to that effect. But fact of the matter was, it was a big deal. And folks, let me say something else. The fact of the matter is that Barack Obama is an extraordinary man. You measure a man or a woman's worth and their courage based upon how they react to overwhelming crises. I watched this guy. Everything but locusts landed on his desk. Not a joke. He had an incredible, and his integrity, his dignity, his decency. He was a president our kids could look up to. Parents wanted them to hear what he had to say. And I believe he was a great president. There wasn't a day, there wasn't a single solitary day that I served with him that I wasn't proud to be with him. And the Affordable Care Act was one of those most important days. We made historic progress. We extended coverage to 22 million Americans who didn't have it. And folks, now we have to finish that job so that we no longer have an argument about whether or not health care is a privilege or a right. It should be a right for every American. Look, because most of all, it gives people, moms and dads, and families, peace of mind. Remember my mom saying, Dad goes to bed after he lost a particular job where he lost his health care. He said he's staring at the ceiling, going to bed. What happens? What happens if I get sick? What happens? We lose everything. What happens to my family? Folks, look, we have to finish this job. And the way we're going to do that is we have to not only keep them from continuing to eviscerate the Affordable Care Act, but we got to make sure that whether you're covered by your employer, on your own, or not at all, you should have a choice to buy into a public option health care plan like Medicare. It should be a right that people have. The third thing I'm going to focus on is we need much more education, and we need to deal with, quite frankly, the end of the Trump-DeVos education agenda. And I don't think there's any state in America that understands that better than Iowa. I remember when kids, everybody took the Iowa test. You were the proudest. No, I'm sure you were proud, incredibly proud. But look what Republican governors here, as well as your Republican legislature, has done to that. Republicans across the board. Ladies and gentlemen, look. The fact of the matter is, in the 21st century, 12 years of education is not enough to stay in the middle class. It's simply not enough. The fact of the matter is, studies show that 65 out of every 100 people need an education beyond high school to get a job today. Today. That's only going to go up. But think about how unaffordable education is for so many, many people. The fact of the matter is we have to make it more affordable. We have to make sure the economy works, not only for people who have a college degree, but also make it work for people who have on-the-job training, trade programs, community college. We can afford all this. We can afford all this without punishing anybody. If we could put every single solitary person in community college for free. It costs $6 billion a year, cut the cost of four-year college in half, and you say, well, there goes Biden, that big spender again. But guess what? Eliminating one of the 600, or the one loophole of the $1,600+ billion just is called stepped-up basis. Stepped-up basis means if you have a capital gain on the way to cash it in, God forbid you get hit by a truck, your kids get the gain. They don't pay a single tax. It's not an inheritance tax. It was tax on 10 seconds earlier. It's $17 billion out of $1,600 billion and plus. We could put every single qualified student in community college for free. We'd increase our product. We'd give chance. But folks, the point I want to make here, and I'll make this a lot as we go forward about how we pay for the programs, we don't have to punish anybody. We don't have to punish anybody. And it will actually help everybody. We did a survey for the Fortune 500 companies when I was president, along with the Secretary of Labor and along with the Secretary of Commerce. We asked them, what do they need most? They said, we need a more educated workforce. Come on, man. More educated workforce. We know how to do that and give people an opportunity to get the education they need. And I'm talking about post-high school. I'm talking about trade school. I'm talking about short-term programs. I'm talking about being able for people to work with their hands, be able to do the things they want. Look, as I said, I'm going to go in a lot more detail later, but let me just say this. We need to invest and restore the middle class, and we have to have an ambitious plan. It's about the future. The future. Folks, we need to rebuild America with clean, renewable energy. Cleaner, safer, fairer, faster transportation. To confront the existential threat that climate change poses for all of us. And guys, this is not a deal where you have to punish anybody for this. This is not a deal. Guess what? If we invested the money we need, and I understand, I heard on the way out that there's been an agreement on an infrastructure bill, among, at least in principle, between the president and the Democratic leadership in the Congress. We'll see. But guess what? Guess what? It creates millions and millions of jobs. Good, decent paying jobs. Folks, look. As I said, we can do all that we need to do to make this country grow, to restore dignity to work, and all the things we have to do, if we just eliminate unnecessary loopholes. We don't have to raise any of your taxes. Eliminate unnecessary loopholes. And the only thing that stands in the way is our broken political system. It's broken. The country can't afford four more years of a president who wakes up every day to wage a war on Twitter. I think of it the first way. I almost slipped. But guys, while the rest of the world is competing with us, is waging a war for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, We can't afford 4 more years of this. We can't afford more years of a president who abuses the power of the presidency. And most of all, we can't afford 4 more years of a president whose entire agenda has been to divide the country, to split us, to make us be, we have to talk about unity. We have to bring people back together again. And folks, we can give all Americans the opportunity to provide for themselves and their families, being part of the middle class. And one more thing, I know I'm called Middle Class Joe. I talk about it a lot. It's not meant as a compliment. It's meant I'm not sophisticated. But I tell you what, I'm pretty darn sophisticated to know how we have kept, unlike any other nation in tough times, our political, our economic, and our social stability. It's because people genuinely believed that the American dream was alive, that they had access to possibilities. I was with Xi Jinping, who I've spent when I was president, hours and hours with him. We were in a place called the head of China. We're in the president now. We're in a place called Chengdu, a city on the Tibetan Peninsula, having dinner with one another, and we each had an interpreter with us. And he looked at me, he said, "Can you define America for me?" And I said, "Yes, I can." And I meant it in one word, possibilities. Possibilities. And folks, I'm more optimistic about the possibilities of America if we just get up, raise our heads up, remember who we are. This is the United States of America. Folks, we're the most productive workers in the world. We're in a situation where America is nearly energy independent. We have more great research universities in America than all the rest of the world combined. As my wife, the professor, would say, Google it if you doubt me. And look, the fact of the matter is, America, the only thing that can tear America apart is no foreign, Emma. It's America itself. And folks, we've got to stop it. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is. I want to make sure they know who we are, who I am. We choose hope over fear. We choose unity over division. We choose truth over lies. And we choose science over fiction. This is the United States of America. We can do anything. God bless you, and may God protect our troops. And I mean it. Thank you.